Claire Davis on work for HR Recruit. We've got the lovely Marion Hewitt, who is assisting with this boardroom today all around culture and the importance of culture in an organisation. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Marion so that she can start showing you a few of her slides that she's got today, and we'll start up a conversation about culture within organisations. Over to you, Marion.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's nice to see you. Those of you that have been and joined us before know we run these very much as discussions, conversations. We'll put you into breakout rooms. It's not about chalk and talk. So bringing in shared expertise. Just to think about a few. Oh, sorry, I'm having to multitask because I've got people trying to come in as well. Hang on. Right. Let me just share screen so we can start. As a starting question or thought, what do we mean by organisational culture? We can look at various different definitions, but what's our instinctive response to that? And to me, it's something that I just think it is so important. It's all about the whole employee experience and all the things that we want to be able to create in an environment for people to do their best, to be their best. But what's quite interesting is that the research hasn't actually found any clear correlation between organisational culture and organisational performance. Which is actually quite upsetting. I thought, you kind of think if you had a really positive culture, that actually, I've got a slide with one brand on it particularly, which I think actually demonstrates that there's not always that. But I think it is much more about more than that. It's, the right things to do, creating environments that contribute to well-being and all of that side of it. So here is a thought. I don't know, lost track of how many we've got coming in. We've got quite a few, so loads coming in. Right, I think we might just go into rooms for a few minutes to chat about this, because it's something that we hear quite a lot. We hear about people do they leave a job or do they leave a manager? But actually, if you extrapolate that a bit further, is it the culture they're leaving? Is it actually the culture has enabled that style of behaviour which lets that manager operate in that way, which creates the situation? So I thought that was actually a starting point to actually just have a bit of a conversation about that. Do people leave a job, a manager or a culture, and what actually allows or enables that to happen? So we're just going to have 5 minutes on that one. So how many people we've got here? What about one of the groups? Would you like to, whether somebody from group 1, which is Amanda, Anna, Jackie, Paula, Roxanne, anybody there like to share the thread of their discussion?
Yeah, I'm happy to. We kind of said that it can be any of those things in isolation. So it could be that your job's boring, or that you've just progressed as much as you can. Say you want to leave for career progression, or that you've just done enough there. It could be that you've got an awful manager, or it could be that the culture is completely toxic. But I think where we came to is that actually they all feed into one another, or they all can feed into one another. Because if you've got a manager who is not committed to progressing you, or is a bully, and he's just being influenced by a toxic culture, then you're in a cycle that is just impossible to get out of.
Yeah, thank you. Any thoughts from one of the other groups? Angela, Abby, your group, anything else you wanted to throw in?
I think in our group we have something similar as well, where it could be each individual, each of those, but it could be a combination of how one of it's influencing the other, making it happen. But one of the members of the group actually mentioned it could be an external force as well from outside of those. So yeah, it could be either of those.
Thank you. So we just wanted to have that as a brief conversation, just as a starter, and then to move on thinking too about culture and the different elements of it. Now, this is a rather long definition of culture. Hang on. So it's about the combination of values and beliefs that characterise organisations as transmitted by the socialisation experiences newcomers have, the decisions made by management, and the stories and myths people tell and retell about their organisation. So the last bit was quite the stories and myths. I thought was quite an interesting perspective if we think about our what we associate with certain organisations and, you know, the wider brand and reputation. But I think the definition that probably most of us know as the generally accepted one is culture being the way we do things around here. And I just thought about a few brands that I felt, you know, I'd recognise as a brand, as a culture, and all the things that you would then associate with that, you know, whether it's a positive sense or whether you might have some slightly less positive associations with some of those brands. You know, it all is part of the culture. So in terms of our conversation and what I thought would be helpful, but this isn't dictating, this is about you creating a conversation in your groups that is helpful. But what does this mean if we think about culture? What does this mean in relation to our role as people professionals? How should we be trying to impact it, create, lead, demonstrate, embed culture as part of our role? You know, we talk about culture change a huge amount, and again, the last research, or the major research that I found was actually some time ago, but actually it found that there was little evidence that major culture change programs actually really worked. But part of the challenge with that is often organisations couldn't really or didn't really define what they wanted their culture to be. It's very difficult to, you know, clearly articulate what the culture is and actually also how you measure it. You know, did they agree a clear way of measuring culture? You know, how do you define that? And how do you know when you've got there? You know, one of my favourite coaching questions, you know, how will you know when you've got there? And if we're looking at culture, yes, there are some tools and measurements, but actually what do you as an organisation want to use as your measure? You can use, you know, actual tools, or, you know, it may be your employee survey, pulse surveys, feedback, whatever. But when we think about culture, you know, how will it impact on, how does it impact on engagement, on performance, employee attraction and retention? So just make a note of those questions or general thoughts about what you would like to talk about. Do any other groups discover that 15 minutes went far too quickly in terms of what we were trying to talk about? So let's just have a go, trying to capture some key thoughts so that, yeah, just to get the benefit across the whole group. Hopefully you've got somebody from your group that's happy to just a few key thoughts or points, new points, or, you know, questions really. We came up with some real cool, I think the question we really got caught up in was the difference between brand and culture, and the link and which is first and all of that, but I won't go down that rabbit hole now. So group, which I'm going to start in the middle. So we had, where should we go? Anna, Michelle, Paula, Flo, somebody from your group like to summarise your conversation?
I spoke about the company I work for around their culture, and there was a great emphasis, even when I'm quite new there, even throughout the whole process of interview, they spoke heavily about their culture and their values, and it's something that I see now, that every single person from the board members, it's incumbent on them to ensure that the values are spoken about every day. So it's I'm being conscious about ensuring that my language as well is delivering the value so everyone remembers what they are. And I think it kind of has tailored in regards of our culture, because it's a very positive, fun, loving family culture. I contacted a board member, a couple of board members, thinking that they wouldn't get back to me, and I had really amazing comments, and they booked to see me already, and it was just nice. And you can see from me, it's that the culture has lived from the top down, and I'm doing sessions with all the team members, and I can see the culture being lived by every single person I've seen. And I've had an incident where we've had a complaint about a manager, and my boss straight away is like, we're not going to have any toxic behavior, and actually there's going to be a consequence for anyone who doesn't live the values. So I think for me that's great, and we kind of was trying to connect it to certain KPIs. But I know Michelle wanted to also speak about her company.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's loads of questions I want to ask on that, but we can't get stuck on one place, so thank you. So yeah, Michelle, is there something you wanted to add then?
Yeah, so obviously being in the same group, so it was interesting because they got a really positive experience around the values, but I've recently took on a role at a football club, and finding that there really was no values there, because the values obviously are those starting point to shape a culture within an organisation. And I found that I would ask people what the values were, and nobody knew them. So I had to go on a hunt for them. And there were really values where you look thinking, oh, those aren't values. And so we've literally having to start from scratch. And so it was just to show the difference, where you've got an organisations where their values are there and they're being lived, they're being breathed, to an organisation where they don't even know what the values were. And it's very much, obviously because of it being a football club as well, it's very old fashioned, it's very back with the times. So that's been quite difficult in terms of the culture, and there's lots of little subcultures there. So you've got different cultures at the training ground, different cultures at the stadium, different cultures at the academy. And it's hard getting a balance, because it's one rule for one for the other. There's no processes followed. So it's a real challenge to get, a unity across the organisation, really.
Yeah.
And apologies if you can hear snoring, it is my dog, and she's very, very loud. So apologies, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So room 4, which was Abby, Caroline, Nikki and Rachel.
Yeah, so Caroline started off and did a really good piece for us around people. What does it mean for us in our role as people professionals? And it's about how we then negotiate and get people on board. Caroline, I don't know if you want to expand on that before I go into the other.
It was just to say that in the roles that I've had, it's often to lead, you get kind of the project lead for that project, but it's kind of making sure that the seniors are checking in and they get behind it, and then whatever then gets agreed, it gets cascaded out in a dialogue that everybody understands, and it isn't just, as you said, like driven by the customers. It gets engagement, and people, regardless of what roles they have in a business, they understand how it relates to them. So it's using the correct terminology, and they have the similar vision in their mind of what that culture looks like when it's good, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're doing. So it was that.
Yeah, and I didn't want to talk about that because obviously the way Caroline presented that was so good in the group. So thanks, Caroline. We then got to talking about the other points on there about how do you define and develop culture and define your brand, and that came on to the debate about what is the link between culture and brand, and that whole debate about the two. And I talked around my employment, so I work in the NHS, and I don't know if there's anyone else from the National Health Service on this call, but it's very, very interesting because every organisation is piggybacking onto one organisation's success around the just and learning culture, and that is great, and we should always have been a just and learning culture. We have a lot of disciplinaries where it's seen as, oh, you've done something wrong, we are going to discipline you, rather than focusing on the learning about what actually went on, because people don't generally come to work to do a bad job, and that impacts on how people feel they're treated in the culture that you have. So we're all looking at this, but for me there's a big gap. I've just been recruited into a new role that's around head of culture and inclusion and engagement in a different trust. I didn't think I'd get the job, and I explained that in the group because I strongly challenged that trust. So each NHS trust has its own values. So each trust is its own little business. They have their own chief executive, they'll have their own trust board, and they have their own values, but at no point do we ever go back, or very rarely do we go back as an organisation. And this is my experience for over 20 plus years in the NHS doing what I do. Rarely do we go back and go, let's revisit that value. Does it really fit? And I gave the example of the trust I'm moving to wanting to be the most inclusive employer. Well, that's really ambitious, and that's great to be that ambitious, but do you understand how long that takes to develop a culture of that at the top, and all the way through the organisation? And do you also realise that you know, none of your values really linked to that? We've got respect in there and respecting differences, and that is it. So, you know, we've not really gone back and revisited for what our aims changed to be. And so that's something for me in the NHS. And I also talked around the brand bit, around culture and debate around the brand, because if you look at employee attraction, we're getting so many people applying to work for the NHS at the moment. In the last 12 months, it's significantly shot up, particularly in non-clinical roles. And I think that's great that people want to work for the NHS, but it's on the back of COVID and on the back of all of the publicity that the NHS has had. And that's fabulous, because we do work hard and we have done a great job, and it is a rewarding role to have. Any job in the NHS is. But that to me is brand, not about your trust culture. And I think, you know, we talked around that and the links between the brand and culture. And I think it was Nikki had said, if Nikki's around, where's Nikki? I think Nikki had said, yeah, you're there, I can see you now. Nikki had said something about, you know, you can have a really strong brand, but not necessarily a strong culture behind that. And I think to me, that's where the NHS might be in different trusts.
Thank you. Really good points in there. Thank you very much. Group 5, Jackie, Phil, Sting and Viv. Somebody there like to summarise your discussion, or any questions you threw out there as a result of it?
I'll just pitch in there.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, yeah, we spoke a lot about different elements of the questions. We were talking about how do we measure it, and we talked about staff satisfaction surveys as being one way of working that, but also that exit interviews could be a way of measuring it. When people do leave, why are they leaving? The complications with that are, I suppose, it can be the case that people are afraid to give honest feedback in case it comes up with bad references or such like, even though that wouldn't normally happen. With the staff surveys, you can obviously take out the demographic information, so it is anonymous. Something that we're doing at the moment is we're starting a series of mini surveys, and we'll measure that over the course of the next year to see how things have changed. Yeah, so there was that measuring there. What else did we talk about? Oh, employee recognition, in terms of how do you improve culture? What do you do? That it has to be from a kind of a top down. If you haven't got buy-in at the top, it's never going to work. So you have to get buy-in. And how do you do that? Well, you can do that by trying to sell the message of what happens when you have got good culture, and the cost savings you can have by not having to keep doing training and recruitment of new staff and productivity, efficiencies, etc. I'm just conscious of time. So yeah, we spoke a lot about that and others, but we'll probably leave it there for now.
Thank you very much. Group 1, Fiona, Joe, Susie, anything you'd wanted to add, please?
We had, you know, Fiona shared with us the approach that she's taken where she is in her organisation, and I don't want to take it away from Fiona, but it was about getting champions or ambassadors across the organisation that then, you know, came together, chaired by HR, but then we're out in the organisation. Fiona, you're closer to it, so you jump in, because I thought that was a fantastic initiative and well worth sharing.
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing we didn't discuss was who was going to talk, so apologies. What I was sharing with the girls was basically that we didn't really have an engaged culture, I would suppose. So my background, I would have started with the company, but not in HR. We are a food manufacturing company, and I actually started in production. So I progressed my way up to HR. But when I was on the floor, I suppose that we didn't really have a HR team. We didn't have like the usual engagement surveys. And it felt like we were kind of just letting people walk out the door, which isn't a great thing. But once we got a HR team into place, we started getting engagement surveys, getting feedback back from our employees. And in the last 2 years, we pulled together a team or a committee, which we call our values team. So they live and breathe our values, which are for us, our care, commitment, and trust. So they kind of look after any like engagement events. At the minute, we're doing a 28-day challenge. Obviously, with COVID, we're very limited to what we can do. Event wise, so the 28-day challenge kicked off this month, and it's going really well. But we feel from our focus on the values team, having a mix of be it production workers, line managers, members of our senior leadership team, members of the HR team, and even our managing director getting very highly involved with it as well. It has very much been a success for us and has a really good engaged culture, and a very positive culture for us. So that, yeah, that's pretty much what I was sharing with the guys.
Thank you. We need to bring you back. We need to bring you back in 2 weeks' time when we're doing the one on values. So I've noted your name. You'll be
guest speaker. And also Susie, I think, has got one of the nicest roles at the moment. She's doing a piece on culture, and that was really insightful.
Just mindful of time. Susie, do you want to add something? Are you able to?
Just very briefly, I've been very fortunate to do some HR consultancy with a global business, one of their groups, where the business has been in a sort of blame culture, sort of command control culture for the last 15, 20 years. And the new CEO, so part of the leadership team is sponsoring the HR group director to transform HR, which hasn't really existed, into a strategic function. So we've got quite a mountain to climb, but there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I'm very much wanting to we're starting with the vision, the why, the values, why does this business exist? Why do we get up in the morning? So really engaging everyone down to the shop floor, because I really related to what Fiona was saying, and getting everybody involved and finding those people who can help facilitate driving it.
Yeah, thank you. And we've got about 2 minutes left, but I don't want to leave the last group out because their contributions just as valuable as everybody else's. So Amanda, Inga, your group, anything you would like to add, please?
I'll jump in unless anybody else wants to. So we, well, I think I kicked off the discussion by talking about the impact that last year has had on culture, and how the pressures that continue are letting some of those things that are fundamental to developing a good culture slip if you're not careful. Please, other members of the group, jump in. And we were talking about the lack of distinction between home and work now that people are remote working so much, and the impact that can have on culture, because things that you wouldn't have done previously happen now. For example, responding to emails or messages at different times of the day or night that you wouldn't necessarily have done when you were working in an office. And Zora quite rightly said, how important mental well-being is to culture, and that's certainly been a big focus for us in our company over the last year. Has anybody else got anything they wanted to add to what we discussed? I'm sure I haven't reflected everything.
Could I very quickly say something? I've been reading about vulnerability today, and a lot of you talked about trust, and apparently, and you, Inga, you just talked about this distinction between home and child come in and sit with her while we were talking. And I think the research shows that vulnerability comes before trust. So if we're looking to build trust, if we're able to show that vulnerability, particularly as a leader, and say, look, you know, I'm having some issues here with my mental health, trying to do it. So that's my thought for the day.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and if you want to elaborate on that, look at the Brené Brown TED Talk, which is all around that, and it's amazing if anybody hasn't seen it. Okay, I think we better wrap up, because I knew there'd be lots to chat about on that topic. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to have gone away with any clear answers, but hopefully it's all given you sort you know, reflection, questions, and actually challenge. I think for me, actually, it's if people leave with some challenge to themselves and what they can be doing, that's the best outcome from these discussions. I'll hand back in a second. The only thing I just wanted to said right at the beginning, right at the end, Inga just said about wellbeing and mental health. If you're in an organisation with an HR team, at the moment I'm offering complimentary self-care power hour for HR people, just because we've had a rough time as a profession, and it's just an hour out for your team. And then there's also one being run by HR Recruit in a few weeks. But if anybody's interested, we'll send out details after, but it's just a sort of a give back to HR in tough times. So yeah, Claire, can I hand back to you to wrap up and whatever else you need to add, please?
Yeah, of course, no problem at all. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day today to attend the virtual boardroom. I think we've covered some really great points there. And actually, it was interesting to see that values are very much aligned with culture, and that came out in quite a few of our conversations in breakout rooms, and also self-care. So just to make you aware, on the 18th of February, we are running a virtual boardroom around values. Are they just writing on the wall? And we have also got a self-care virtual boardroom taking place on the 23rd of February. So what I'll do after today, after today's virtual boardroom, is I'll send you all an email with information about those virtual boardrooms, and also a link to the LinkedIn post that I will put on as well after this call. But if you need to reach out to me, if you want to ask any questions, if you need contact information for anybody that's been on this call to ask further information, then please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'll see if I can forward that information on to you as well. One other thing to highlight that will also be on the email is an invite to our membership page. So again, our membership page gives you access to HR professionals from around the UK, where you can share ideas and ask questions. It's actually been pinging like crazy while I've been on this call, somebody asking about a learning platform that they need to put into their organisation, and lots of people have been responding to this lady to help and give guidance. So that could also be a useful tool to you as well at the moment, so I'll make sure that's on the email. But if you do need anything at all, just reach out and I'll see if I can point you in the right direction. But thank you all again for your time today. Take care.